You've got $750,000 sitting in an account. Not someday money. Not if I sell the house money. Real, liquid, sitting right there money. And you want to own a theme park. You know $750,000 doesn't buy you Six Flags Over Texas. It doesn't buy you Universal. It doesn't buy you Cedar Point. It doesn't buy you a single working roller coaster at a park that's actually open. You've done the math. A functioning theme park with real attendance and real revenue costs hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions. You know that. You're not delusional, but you still want in because $750,000 is either going to sit in an index fund quietly making you a comfortable retiree in 40 years, or it's going to do something, and you'd rather it did something. So you open up ChatGPT and you type, "How can I own a theme park without spending hundreds of millions of dollars?" And the AI gives you the answer you already suspected. It talks about franchise family entertainment centers. It talks about buying a stake in an existing operator. It talks about starting small with a trampoline park or an axe throwing bar and calling that phase 1. It's thorough. It's polite. And somewhere around paragraph 4, it tells you the truth you didn't want to hear. Real theme parks, the kind with roller coasters and gates and mascots, take serious capital. 9 figures, minimum if you're building from the ground up. You close the chat, and your brain does the thing brains do. It says, yeah, but that's if you're building new. What if you didn't build one? What if you found one that already exists? One that somebody else already paid for? One that's just sitting there? And 2 nights later, doom scrolling before bed, you see it. A photo essay. Rusted roller coasters swallowed by vines. A Ferris wheel frozen mid-rotation. Alligators sunning themselves on what used to be a parking lot. The caption says it's been abandoned for almost 20 years, right outside New Orleans. Six Flags. A real, honest-to-God Six Flags park, dead and rotting in the swamp. Your brain starts doing math it has no business doing. The land's probably worthless. The rides are probably scrap. Maybe the city just wants it gone. Maybe you swoop in, clean it up a little, slap a coat of paint on it, and kaboom, you're a millionaire. Here's the thing about that fantasy. It's a lot more fun than what actually happens. Dreams are always sweeter than reality, and that gap between the dream and the paperwork is exactly why most people who think about reviving a dead business never do anything but think about it. So let's close that gap. Let's actually look at what it would take to bring a dead Six Flags back to life, what it's actually taking the people trying to do it right now. And by the end, you'll know whether your $750,000 belongs anywhere near this deal or whether you should be doing something completely different with it. Here's the version of this story running in your head right now. You think a dead theme park is basically a big, empty lot with some cool, rusty stuff on it. You think ownership works like buying a used car. There's a park, there's a price tag, you negotiate, you sign, it's yours. You think the hard part is finding the deal. You think once you have the deed, the rest is just elbow grease. Pressure wash a few slides, restring some lights, maybe get a local news crew out for a grand reopening segment, and the gates swing open again. You think the land is basically free because nobody else wants it. None of that is how this actually works. Not even close. What you're picturing when you picture reviving a dead theme park is really closer to buying a haunted house and repainting the porch. What it actually is closer to negotiating a multi-decade lease with a city government, passing environmental testing on land that sat underwater for a month, re-engineering a drainage system, satisfying ride safety inspectors who will shut you down over a single loose bolt, and assembling several $100 million from people who don't hand that kind of money to enthusiasm alone. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why that gap exists, and more importantly, whether you should try to revive a dead park like this one, build something new from scratch, or just buy your way into a theme park that's already thriving. One of those 3 is going to be the right move for someone sitting on $750,000. We'll get there. Before we talk about death, let's talk about life. Before you can understand why a theme park failing is such a big deal, you need to understand what winning actually looks like, because the number is bigger than you think. And the way the money comes in is not the way you think. Take the modern Six Flags company as a whole. The same brand, just the parks that are still open and running. In a recent year, Six Flags Parks pulled in a little over 47 million total visits across the whole chain. 47 million. That's more people walking through Six Flags turnstiles in 12 months than live in the entire state of California. Now, here's the part that surprises people. The ticket is not really the product. On average, each guest spends somewhere around $60 while they're inside the park, and that number splits almost evenly in half. About half of it is the admission itself. The other half, the other roughly $30, is food, drinks, souvenirs, games, the parking fee, the extra charge, skip the line pass. That second half, the stuff that has nothing to do with the ride you came for, is basically the entire profit margin of the business. Multiply $60-ish by 47 million guests, and you're talking about a company doing north of $3 billion a year in revenue, off a business model built on getting a lot of people through the gate and then getting each of them to spend a little more than they planned to once they're inside. That's the real mechanic of a theme park. It isn't a ride business. It's a captive audience retail business wearing a roller coaster as a costume. You don't make your money selling tickets. You make your money because once someone's paid $60 to get in, and they're standing in a 100-degree parking lot with 3 cranky kids, they will absolutely pay $8 for a lemonade rather than walk back to the car. That's what healthy looks like. Massive, predictable foot traffic converted into repeat small dollar transactions at scale for months at a time, every single season. Keep that model in your head, because everything about a dead theme park is what happens when one link in that chain, the foot traffic, gets severed. And once that link breaks, the whole machine doesn't slow down. It stops completely. Let's talk about what you're physically getting if you decide to take on a dead theme park, using the real one sitting in New Orleans East as our example. The site is 227 acres. For scale, that is bigger than Vatican City. It sits right at the intersection of 2 interstates, which sounds great for access, until you remember this is also low-lying land next to a canal, in a part of the country that gets hit by hurricanes basically every year. Here's a detail almost nobody knows. When this park was originally built in the late 1990s, the ground underneath it was so soft and swampy that engineers had to construct an entire concrete platform just to give the rides and buildings something solid to sit on. You're not buying land. You're buying a man-made foundation, poured specifically because the natural ground couldn't hold the weight of a theme park on its own. Then there's the water infrastructure, and this is the part that actually killed the place. A theme park in a flood-prone city needs a serious stormwater and drainage system, pumps, catch basins, intake lines, the whole underground plumbing network that keeps rainwater from turning the midway into a swimming pool. When Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, this park sat under roughly 12 feet of floodwater for weeks. 12 feet. Every electrical system, every ride mechanism, every piece of below-grade infrastructure was submerged in a toxic soup of floodwater for over a month. 20 years of Louisiana humidity, standing water, and complete neglect after that didn't just damage the rides. It turned the entire drainage system into rubble. The pumps that were supposed to protect the park from flooding stopped working decades ago, which means the site has been flooding itself in every heavy rain on top of whatever hurricane damage is still sitting there. Then there's what nature did once the humans left. 20 years of Louisiana swampland reclaiming 227 acres means the site isn't just overgrown. It's now genuine wildlife habitat. Alligators, wild boar, cottonmouth snakes, vultures nesting in the skeleton of what used to be a roller coaster. Before a single new attraction gets built, someone has to physically clear 2 decades of trees, brush, and wildlife off the property and reactivate the entire underground stormwater system from scratch. That's before construction even starts. That's just to get the land back to empty lot condition. On this project specifically, that clearing and drainage reactivation work alone was budgeted at around $5 million. And that's paid for by the city, not the developer, before the developer builds a single thing. This is the part the fantasy always skips. You don't inherit a theme park. You inherit 227 acres of dead concrete, drowned electrical systems, and reclaimed wetland. And the theme park part is the very last thing you get to think about. This park has one of the wildest multi-act stories of any dead business in America. It didn't just die once. It's died, gotten a resurrection plan, and had that plan collapse more than once. Let's walk through all of it, because every act teaches you something different. Act 1, the birth. Local developers spent almost a decade trying to get this thing financed, going all the way back to the early 1990s. It finally opened in the year 2000 as Jazzland, themed around New Orleans music and culture, built for roughly $135 million. It lasted 3 seasons before going bankrupt in 2002. Act 2, the rescue. Six Flags swooped in and bought the bankrupt park for $22 million. a fraction of what it cost to build, and signed a 75-year lease with the city. On paper, this looked like exactly the kind of buy it cheap, revive it move you're dreaming about right now. Six Flags rebranded it, reopened it, and ran it for 2 seasons. Act 3, The Death. August 2005, Hurricane Katrina. The park sat under 12 feet of water for weeks. It never reopened. By 2009, Six Flags itself was in bankruptcy and simply walked away from the lease entirely. The city took the land back and was left holding an asset nobody wanted. Act 4, The False Revival, Round 1. In 2012, the city announced a plan to turn the wreckage into an outlet mall, reusing some of the surviving rides as a tribute to the old park. 2 years of planning. By 2014, the deal collapsed. Act 5, The False Revival, Round 2. More developers came and went through the mid-2000s. A promising redevelopment agreement fell apart in 2021 over a dispute about who got final say on the plans. Nothing built, nothing signed. Act 6, The Current Attempt. In 2023, a development group called Bayou Phoenix finally locked in a deal with the city's redevelopment authority, a 50-year lease for $1 a year with a $500 million master plan, a water park, hotels, a youth sports complex, retail, and a movie production studio. Demolition of the old rusted rides finally began in November 2024. The park's biggest wooden coaster came down in February 2025. Here's the part that should make you sit up. As of the summer of 2026, right now, this project is in trouble again. The city's redevelopment authority formally accused the developer of missing required construction milestones and set a hard deadline to fix it or risk losing the deal. The two sides have been publicly trading letters accusing each other of mismanagement. And the developer is still out there trying to close roughly $300 million in private financing that hasn't fully materialized yet. Read that timeline again. A dead business that's had at least 4 separate serious revival attempts in 20 years, and the one that's furthest along, the one with a signed lease, a demolished site, and a $500 million plan, is currently sitting on the edge of falling apart over a missed deadline and a funding gap. That is what reviving a dead theme park actually looks like from the inside. It isn't one clean turnaround story. It's a 20-year war of attrition against financing, government bureaucracy, and time itself. And even the team that's made it the furthest isn't out of the woods yet. It's tempting to think Six Flags New Orleans died for one simple reason, a hurricane. But hurricanes are actually the least common way a theme park dies in America. Most dead parks never see a natural disaster at all. Here are 5 genuinely different causes of death. Because if you're going to gamble on a revival, you need to know which failure pattern you're dealing with. Because 1, the natural disaster plus the engineering flaw. This is our park. But it's worth noting the flaw wasn't just a hurricane happened. It was that the site's own drainage system, the pumps and catch basins meant to protect it, failed right alongside everything else, turning a bad storm into a permanent death sentence instead of a temporary closure. Cause 2, corporate portfolio consolidation. Ohio's Geauga Lake is the textbook example. It was one of the oldest amusement parks in America, dating back to 1887. And by the early 2000s, it had absorbed a neighboring SeaWorld and become, briefly, the largest theme park in the world by acreage. Then, Six Flags sold it to Cedar Fair, the same company that owned nearby Cedar Point. 3 years later, in 2007, Cedar Fair simply announced the ride side of the park would not reopen. Some people believe the whole purchase was designed from day one to eliminate a competitor to Cedar Point, not to run it. This park didn't die from neglect or disaster. It died because its owner had a bigger, more profitable park 30 minutes away and didn't need to. Cause 3, over-leveraged construction debt. South Carolina's Hard Rock Park opened in 2008 with a price tag north of $400 million. It filed for bankruptcy the same year it opened. The lesson here is brutal. You can build something genuinely impressive and still die immediately. If your construction debt assumes an attendance number, the park never actually hits in its first season. Cause 4, safety and liability collapse. New Jersey's Action Park became notorious for lax safety standards on its rides. Mounting lawsuits and a reputation for danger eventually closed it in the mid-1990s. This is the reminder that a park doesn't need bad economics to die. It just needs enough injury claims that insurance and liability make continued operation impossible. Case 5. a hybrid concept that never made economic sense. Chicago had a park literally called Old Chicago that combined rides with an indoor shopping mall under one roof. Strong early attendance, but the hybrid business model, split between retail rents and ride revenue, never generated enough profit to sustain itself, and it closed within a few years of opening in the early 1980s. 5 parks, 5 completely different killers, a natural disaster compounded by an engineering failure, a corporate decision to eliminate internal competition, construction debt that outran real-world attendance, a collapse in safety and liability, and a hybrid business model that just didn't pencil out. If you're evaluating any dead theme park as a potential revival, the very first question isn't how much does it cost? It's which of these 5 things actually killed it, because that tells you whether the underlying problem is even fixable. Here's where we stop selling you the dream and start being straight with you. Academic research on abandoned and reused entertainment sites keeps turning up an uncomfortable pattern. When a dead, themed space actually gets redeveloped successfully, it very often doesn't come back as the same thing. Case studies of abandoned theme parks in China found that when these sites do find new life, it's frequently as something else entirely. Informal community space, urban exploration destinations, even wedding photography backdrops, not as a reopened amusement park. Even a well-documented case like Kunming's old expo site backs this up. The actual academic framework for what typically happens to a large-scale park after it loses momentum is follow-up reuse, meaning a different use for the land, not resurrection of the original concept. That matters enormously for our definition here, because reviving something means bringing back the same business in its original form, not converting a dead theme park into apartments and calling it a win. And the research is telling us that convert to something else is the more common outcome, not the exception. Now, the flip side exists too. Indonesia's Taman Mini. Indonesia Indah is a documented case of a park that actually was revitalized and reopened as itself, with stronger attractions and better infrastructure. So it's not impossible. It's just rare, and it usually takes exactly what we're watching happen in New Orleans right now. Government backing, a below-market lease, and a huge capital stack. And even then, it can still fall apart, which is exactly what's happening with the funding dispute happening as this video is being made. Beyond the redevelopment outcome data, here's what specifically threatens a project like this one, even when everything looks great on paper. Financing can collapse midstream, you can have a signed lease and a demolished site and still not have your money fully closed, which is exactly the position Bayou Phoenix is in right now. Government partners can turn adversarial. The same city agency that approved your master plan can turn around and declare you in default over missed milestones. And now your 50-year lease is genuinely at risk. Environmental remediation can run over budget in ways nobody predicts until the bulldozers are already on site. And the clock itself is an enemy. Every year a distressed site sits half-finished, it costs money to maintain, security to guard, and public goodwill to keep alive. New Orleans East residents have now waited over 20 years for this land to become something again, and patience is not infinite. This isn't a reason to never attempt a revival. It's a reason to go in with your eyes open. On paper, revival math can look fantastic. Cheap land, government incentives, an eager market. In practice, the actual failure risk usually isn't the economics at all. It's execution, financing, and time. Let's bring this back to you and your $750,000, because that number determines everything about which move actually makes sense. If you've got under $1 million, reviving a dead theme park like this one is not a realistic option for you. Full stop. This is a 9-figure undertaking with government negotiations, environmental remediation, and construction debt measured in the hundreds of millions. What you can actually do at this level is buy into something already working. A small, already profitable family entertainment center, an established go-kart track, an indoor trampoline, or axe-throwing franchise with real foot traffic and real cash flow on day one. You're not reviving anything. You're buying a small, boring, already thriving slice of the theme park adjacent world, and you're doing it because at your check size, already booming beats dead and cheap every single time. If you've got $1 million to $25 million, you're now in range to become a genuine minority investor in a project like this one. Not the lead developer, but a capital partner in the equity stack of a master planned revival. or the sole owner of a much smaller regional attraction that's still operating but underperforming and needs a turnaround, not a resurrection. If you've got $25 million to $250 million, you could realistically lead the revival of a mid-sized dead park, something with a smaller footprint than 227 acres, without the multi-decade government entanglement, where you're the majority owner assembling your own capital stack instead of chasing after somebody else's. And if you're sitting on $250 million or more, congratulations. You're now big enough to be the actual Bayou Phoenix in this story. The master developer capable of negotiating a 50-year city lease, financing a $500 million mixed-use master plan, and absorbing years of bureaucratic delay while you wait for the money to close. At $750,000, the honest answer is this: you are not the buyer for a dead 227-acre Six Flags. You are, at best, a tiny slice of somebody else's much bigger capital stack. And more realistically, your money does far more good chasing an already thriving small attraction than it does chasing a dream this size. If you were serious about pursuing a revival like this, whether with your own money or somebody else's, here's who actually makes it happen, because it is never one person. You'd start with a commercial real estate broker who specializes in distressed and government-owned land, because these deals move through public agencies, not open listings. You'd bring in environmental consultants immediately, because any site that's flooded or sat abandoned for years needs soil and groundwater testing before anyone can responsibly plan construction on it. You'd need zoning and land use attorneys to navigate the redevelopment authority, the lease terms, and the development milestones that, as we just saw, can sink the entire deal if missed. You'd bring in an adaptive reuse architect and a master planning team to figure out what can actually be salvaged versus what has to come down. You'd need general contractors experienced in large-scale entertainment construction, not residential or office building. You'd need leasing brokers to fill the retail and hospitality components once they're built. And you'd need property managers lined up well before opening day, because a $500 million mixed-use site doesn't run itself. Here's the realistic advice, though. Almost nobody should try to run all of that themselves. The winning move, and the one Bayou Phoenix itself is a version of, is to become or partner with a single master developer who quarterbacks the entire process: government relations, financing, construction, leasing, as one turnkey operation, rather than you personally trying to manage 9 different specialists across a multi-year timeline. Your job, if you're in this deal at all, is picking the right master developer to trust with your money, not trying to be one yourself. So why would anyone do this at all, given everything you just heard? Because when it works, revival has advantages that building new simply doesn't. You're not fighting for a brand new zoning approval from scratch. The land is already zoned for entertainment use. And in this case, the city is desperate enough for it to succeed that they handed over a 50-year lease for $1 a year. You inherit brand recognition and nostalgia for free. Everyone in New Orleans already knows what the old Six Flags was, which is a marketing head start no brand new park could ever buy. And you get to skip the years of public approval battles that plague brand new large-scale developments, because the site's use as an entertainment destination is already an accepted fact of the neighborhood. That's the trade you're actually making with a revival. You give up speed and certainty, and in exchange, you get land, brand, and government goodwill that would otherwise cost you years and enormous sums to build from nothing. You started this video with $750,000 and a fantasy, a cheap park, a little cleanup, and a fast fortune. Here's what you actually know now. A revival like Six Flags New Orleans isn't a fixer-upper. It's a 2-decade fight involving concrete foundations, drowned drainage systems, government leases, and hundreds of millions of dollars. And even the team that's gotten furthest is fighting for its life against a funding gap and a broken deadline right now, in real time. You know theme parks die for at least 5 completely different reasons, and the cause of death determines whether a revival is even possible. You know the academic research says most revived sites actually become something else entirely, not the business that died there. And you know that at $750,000, this particular deal was never actually for you. Not because you couldn't dream it, but because the real players in this story operate at a scale that starts where your entire net worth ends. Your $750,000 still has a home. It's just not underneath a rusted roller coaster in New Orleans East. It's in the small, boring, already thriving attraction nobody makes documentaries about, the one that was never abandoned in the first place.